I'd love it if you could give us a sense of how we got here and where we're trying to get to.
Sure. Okay, so first of all, thank you for asking this question. It gives me an opportunity to geek out on some of my favorite topics. So
Geek away.
This will be fun.
Geek away.
Okay, so so in the very beginning, when B.F. Skinner sort of founded the whole field, what he found was the consequences of what rats do matter to affect how likely it is that the rats will do that again in the future. Okay? So when rats get food when they press the lever more in the future. Okay? When rats get shock when they press the lever less. Okay? So punishment and reward, right? Reinforcement and punishment. And so that basic idea is incredibly powerful, right? And so the next maybe 40 years or so, people, behavioral researchers started to say maybe we can apply that basic idea to humans who have socially significant problems. So people with schizophrenia, people with autism, people with intellectual disabilities, children with challenging behaviors. Let's just change the consequences of those behaviors and make those behaviors happen more if they're desirable behaviors like communication, or make those behaviors happen less if they're undesirable behaviors like self-injury or aggression.
Sometimes we call it carrot and stick, right?
Right, yeah.
In the
Very
regular
basic.
world, carrot and stick. You know, you're going towards a carrot or you're avoiding the stick.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's, very, very basic. And as long as those consequences are very powerful or very meaningful to the person whose behavior you're changing, it will produce a change in behavior. It'll work, okay? But it's very, very primitive if that's all you're doing. So up through about the 1960s or so, that's really what ABA looked like. In fact, it wasn't even called ABA back then. It was called behavior modification, because that's what it was about. Modify the frequency of a behavior. That's it. Okay, very, very simple, straightforward. And then, since then, researchers started to notice things like, we could probably be a little more sophisticated and a little more subtle in the way that we do this. So they started to ask questions like, what reinforcer, what consequence would be the most powerful reinforcer for this individual person? Rather than just saying, oh, food, that's probably a reinforcer, right? Let's give everyone food if we want to make the behavior happen more. Instead, started to ask questions, what's the most powerful reinforcer for this child today in this setting right now? And how can we figure that out? How can we motivate them? They started to ask questions like, what might this child's favorite learning format be, right? So we know that lots of practice opportunities are critical for learning, and so discrete trials, great for that, lots and lots of practice. But maybe it doesn't produce the best generalization. Maybe some kids get frustrated with the repetition and the structure. Maybe there's other ways to teach, And so lots and lots of questions like that started to be asked. And so people started to do research on things like preference assessment. Preference assessment is the basic idea that if you want to know what a child wants to work for, what will actually be a powerful reinforcer for that child, it's not your job to answer that question. It's not mom's job to answer that question. The kid is the best person to answer that question. Why? Because he knows what he wants better than anybody, right? So instead of just guessing or picking something out of a hat, give the kid a choice. And the research showed very, very simply and very powerfully, all you have to do is give the kid a choice, okay? And if the kid identifies which of these 2 or 3 things he wants to work for, and you use that as a reinforcer, rather than using your own opinion or mom's opinion or somebody else's, you get a way more powerful reinforcement effect. So in just this one simple idea, we went from using just any old reinforcer that you thought might be a good idea to letting the kid have control over his life, because now he's the one determining what he gets to earn, and it made treatment way more effective. So now, top quality ABA programs, every single time they sit down to teach a kid something, they ask the kid, what do you want to work for? And they give them a meaningful choice, and they let the child determine what it is that they're going to work for. They do that every time they sit down to work with a kid. So you'll see a good therapist will run a miniature preference assessment, it's called, about maybe every 5 to 10 minutes, all day, every day. And it's critical, and it's produced a huge change in the effectiveness of ABA.